Yeah.
And we're live. Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Marketing Rules Live. Today, we're discussing what strategic marketing looks like, strategic marketing leadership actually looks like in a recruitment business. This conversation is really about the difference between marketing activity and marketing leadership. So, why do marketing agencies feel so busy when it comes to their marketing, but it still feels disconnected from growth? So, we're not talking about tactics today. We are talking about leadership, alignment, and commercial direction. And today, obviously, I am joined by James, Chris, and Kat. So, just let's get into it. Question number one. Let's start with you, James. What do we actually mean by strategic marketing leadership?
Within a recruitment business, right?
Within a recruitment business.
Yeah. For me, it's that level up, right? It's the next level up from someone who's managing it and someone who's doing it, right? There's a level above that, right? Which is deciding what the trajectory of all this should be. How does this align with the business goals? I think, this is one of those things that is forgotten. And I know we're going to kind of touch on this. So I might be kind of like stepping on the other questions, but so many times within marketing and recruitment it's kind of working in a silo and absolutely doesn't align with what the business needs to do. So any marketeer who's a strategic leadership within their business needs to be always in place to understand where is this business going to be in 5-10 years time, because that is the goal of the marketing department as well. So that's how I would define it.
Kat, Chris?
I think I would agree as well. For me as well, it's the difference between being reactive and proactive. I think some people can get lost in the weeds of being reactive to things. I know, especially from my previous experience when I've been the only marketer in a recruitment agency, and people come into you all the time, aren't they, with like, this is priority, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And then you can quickly lose your strategy. It goes out the window, doesn't it? Because everyone's got their own priorities, things crop up all the time. And I think, being that strategic kind of level of leadership, it's being proactive and kind of anticipating what might be happening, what might be coming, but also sticking to what you plan, if that makes sense as well. So yeah, being proactive and less reactive, I think.
Yeah. I think so. I think it's I was gonna say it's just made me think of a conversation I was having with someone the other day about the difference between important and urgent.
Yeah.
And there's a matrix, and very often in marketing we get very distracted by the non-important but urgent tasks, and that's what distracts you from the strategic important stuff, but maybe it's kind of a bit more longer term. So I think that's it just made me think of that, and I think that's where that strategic marketing leadership comes in, is kind of is being the person to say, no, these are the priorities, this is where we're going.
Yeah,
we're not going to get distracted by all these other non-urgent important tasks that we all keep getting dragged into. So like you say, like, I agree with what Chris and James have said. It's that level above. It's kind of being able to kind of be that person that kind of pushes back a bit, that protects the marketing space, that has that direction, and that keeps the marketing going where it needs to going, and not getting dragged off into all the other little tasks.
Yes.
Why do you think marketers within recruitment businesses do get dragged off in those either those silos or that reactivity? That we've all been in that vicious circle, that reactivity circle. Why do you think that happens?
I think that's a leading question, isn't it? I think as marketeers, we're probably going to blame other people, aren't we? I think that's what we're probably more like. But this is the thing that we talk about within thinking circles a lot, around how to be a marketing leader. And I think as the marketing lead, you should be in a position to be able to kind of push back on a lot of this and say, actually, no, this is all very kind of reactive, and it should be more proactive. And the marketing lead should have that, again, what Kat said, is that longer term view, right? Because what you kind of get on a day-to-day basis, you know, when you're doing marketing, you're in the weeds, you're thinking about, right, we've got to get these socials out, we've got to get what's collateral built, and you can quite quickly lose focus of actually what's the long-term kind of goal over this, because I think sometimes we put ourselves in a position where we are expected to deliver very quickly, right? But that you know, we know that marketing doesn't deliver in weeks, days and weeks. It delivers in months and years. So I think, but that's where some of this kind of tension, I think, sometimes can come from, is the expectation. And as the marketing lead, it's our job to manage those expectations. So those conversations are way easier when we kind of get into the weeds and are kind of doing the stuff on the day-to-day basis, as opposed to then sitting above that and going, right, yeah, actually we're doing this, but you know, the goal is for this to be great in 3 months' time because it's going to do this, right? That's I think, yeah.
I think also there's potentially this, you know, obviously if you don't work in marketing and you've never had a marketing team before, you don't necessarily understand the differences. I think a lot of recruitment firms get sort of think we just want to get someone and we want to get going and we want to just crack on, which is great in terms of the enthusiasm and starting to deliver stuff, but without the sort of the clearer direction and understanding of the business direction and that appreciation that marketing is there to support the bigger goals. I think it's very easy for people to get overexcited and go, well, we want to go and do this because we've seen someone doing this, and we think that's a really cool thing to do, and that's really on trend at the minute, and we think we should be doing this as well, without really sitting back and thinking, is that going to deliver what we need to achieve our goals? And I think that's where a lot of recruitment firms get sort of sidetracked into these other activities. And just a symptom, I think a lot of recruitment businesses, if they have an internal marketing team, tend to have a singular marketer. It's, you know, it's often, not always, is often a more sort of junior, less experienced person. And I think it's harder when you're at that sort of earlier point in your career to push back and to say no. You kind of feel like you want to say yes, you want to help, you want to deliver. It's not anyone's fault. But then it's just that, you know, there's only so much you can do in a day. And I think when you've got all these requests coming in, you kind of say, yes, I want to do that. I want to help. Yes, I want to get involved in that. I want to be involved in everything. It's very hard to deliver that strategic direction and work for the firm when you're so far, you know, like we've said, entrenched in the weeds. Of the day-to-day, and it's just the volume of requests that comes in. It's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's just sort of like a symptomatic nature of the setup of a lot of recruitment businesses are, without someone who's been there and done it and knows kind of where the priority should be, and who has that authority or that confidence to say, it's not saying no, but it's just saying, okay, well, if you want to do that, what are we reprioritizing? Is that supporting the goals of the business? It's just someone to have that confidence. Usually when you put it to people like that, they kind of go, oh yeah, okay. And a bit more, and then make a bit more of an informed decision. But without that person there doing that, that's where I think recruitment marketing often gets led into the doing and lots of tasks rather than the strategic oversight.
But then why do you think that recruitment businesses mistake that activity for strategy, or do they not? Chris, we'll go to you if you want to jump in on that. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I think a lot of people can be busy fools, where they think that
that's a good expression.
Like they're super busy, but again, I'm going to explain it. That they're kind of foolish with what they're doing. Shameless plug, and that's kind of like external agencies like us, for example. We come in and we kind of know what works, what doesn't work. We've done that trial and error. We do that day in, day out. But also, us coming in as like an external, or anybody else, that other people out there, but we can see what's working for them and what's not working for them as well, if that makes sense. So there are certain activities where, you know, it doesn't bring in the inbound leads that you're looking for, but actually there are other activities that do. And I think as well, with the whole kind of strategy and leadership around it and being proactive and reactive, you know, when you're looking at putting your strategy together, your marketing strategy, there are going to be long-term goals, there are going to be short-term goals, right? You're not just going to have kind of one trajectory. It's like, this is what we do, this is one campaign, let's go. There are so many things in marketing that you need to be looked at. People need to have kind of multiple avenues of what they're doing. So bringing it back to the question, I think people can be busy fools. People are spending a lot of time and energy on something that isn't going to be bringing in the results that they want. So that's kind of what we do, right? When we start working with new clients, it's like, okay, what is your marketing activity now? How much time are you spending on this? And what is your ROI? Because if you're spending 60% of your time on SEO and it's not bringing in the clients that you want to, whereas an email campaign can, but it takes up 10% of your time, what are you doing spending your time on SEO? So yeah, it's kind of looking at things like that, I think.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. I think it's you don't know what you don't know as well. Like you don't maybe they don't know what good looks like. Maybe that's why they're mistaking it for strategy over activity, because they've never had the strategic direction before. They've never had someone going in and saying, this is a good starting point, but actually we could do more, we could do it better focus, we could, this doesn't actually deliver. You're saying the business wants to achieve this, but your marketing's, you might be doing lots. They might think it's a strategy. We've got SEO, we've got a website, we're doing some content. They might think it's a strategy, but we haven't really thought about, oh, actually, we want to be over here getting into this market, but our marketing is all over here doing this for us. I think sometimes it's just, they just don't know what good can look like.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it comes from, if you can do all that and you have a bit of success from doing that, but you're probably going to be successful anyway, right? If you're a recruitment agency, your job is to kind of bring in roles and find and fill those roles and find new clients, et cetera, et cetera. If you're any good at being a recruiter, you're probably going to do all that kind of stuff anyway. And hopefully there's a little bit of marketing going on. And I think that can all get mistaken and jumbled up together, whether, and as opposed to thinking, actually, we could be doing this more efficiently. We could be doing more of this if the marketing was also kind of aligned and switched on, and there was a strategy behind it, and it definitely had some kind of trajectory and direction. Sorry. Then I think that's where you can kind of make the difference as well. So I think it's kind of agreeing with both kind of Kat and Chris, is that there's stuff going on. You've had a bit of success, but actually, you know what? You could do way more with it. It could be way more successful. But mistaking it because you've got stuff coming in, stuff is happening, and you're kind of surviving and work coming in, et cetera, et cetera. That's not a strategy, right? That is that's just kind of mistaking activity that you possibly have just kind of stumbled across, you know what I mean? And, without it really kind of having that long-term goal and that long-term view, that's where I always kind of think where that leadership piece really can make a difference. And understanding things like positioning and messaging and all that kind of stuff that a lot of businesses do when they first start up, but don't ever kind of come back to revisit. And as part of the marketing team, we're always kind of looking, especially when it comes to businesses opening up into new spaces, into new regions, into new areas, like you come back and revisit this kind of stuff. You go back every couple of years, you might review it every 6 months. So actually, you're a new startup. Actually, what you do now is very different to what you did when you first started. So we need to kind of change the type of way that we're speaking to people. We need to be in different groups and be in different spaces and be in different communities and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you don't really have if you're doing all the activity and you're just doing it all over and over and over and over and again for 4 or 5 years and it's kind of working, that's not a strategy. There's a reason why a marketing lead will be able to kind of come and go, right, this is actually, let's shake this up. Let's have a look at this. Is that still working? Why is that still working? Why isn't that working? That kind of stuff, right?
Excellent. Just want to pause there, and just anybody that's just joined us, welcome. This is the Marketing Rules Live, and we are talking about strategic marketing leadership today. So on to the next, let's move on. So we've talked about the difference between, what is that great phrase you used, Chris, busy fools, about how we can sometimes mistake activity for strategy. But and then James and Kat, you were both talking about the need for leadership. So what happens commercially? What have you seen happen commercially when marketing lacks leadership? Who wants to take that?
Well, I mean, I'd say this is where you're on a downward trend sometimes to just becoming what we commonly like to call the colouring in department.
We've all heard that.
Yeah. Or the, can you make it look pretty?
Can you jazz it up a bit?
Can you
Right.
just?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all had those requests. I think kind of, without that strategic direction, we sort of already alluded to some of the points in terms of, you're not really going to be delivering what you could possibly deliver. There's kind of a real missed opportunity without that strategic direction, and it can lead to a lot of frustration with leadership, because they'll, without really understanding, like James was saying, it's not just a tap you can turn on and off. It's not a short-term deliverable. It's that, understanding that things take long-term to kind of come through with marketing. If there's not really that strategic direction, if things aren't really aligned, if they don't feel like the marketing's working or give it back, that's when businesses are very quick to go, well, it's not delivering, let's just turn it off. Or it's the investment doesn't get put into it that should get put into it. There's missed kind of communications between the leadership and the marketing team, or the sales team and the marketing team, because it's all really working as it should be. And yeah, I think it can lead to a lot of unnecessary frustration and frictions between different departments, because perhaps marketing doesn't really understand what it's trying to achieve or what it's trying to help deliver. And the commercial team, the leadership team haven't really communicated that. So I think, there can be a lot of frustration.
Yeah. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Cap, where you said, I'm not trying to be woe is me or anything by this and poor us because we're marketers, but I think we always have to, when we kind of work with businesses, and this probably goes for any of the marketing people out there, we always have to prove that marketing isn't a cost, it's more of an investment, right? And I feel like we are always kind of saying, in the back of our heads, what are we doing to make sure that we are worthwhile within this business? Well, I know I do anyway. And, I think it's not just around marketing. There's so much more that we have to do around making sure that we are visible within the team, right? Because you have to embed yourself within the team. You have to make sure that people can reach out to you and they know that you're there. They know what you do. They know what's happening, and they can kind of rely on you for that support. And I just think that sometimes some companies are quick, like you said, to say, oh, marketing's not working, let's turn it off because we've been doing it for 3 months. And it's like, well, 3 months isn't going to work for really anything, right? Like, marketing's a long-term investment within your business to let it grow. So I think, kind of bringing it back to the question, when we can see that it's not working, it's when it is kind of being reactive, it is looking short term, it is doing all those things. And if you are embedding yourself, if you're using your communication with the right people within the business as well, I think that helps. But if you're going to sit back and just let it do what you do for 6 months, 12 months, and then realize, oh, nothing's actually happening, then you need that kind of quarterly, monthly review of what's working and what's not, I think, as well.
I mean, we always talk about in the team, right? Where are we adding value, right? And so that's, I think you need to continually kind of question where you're adding value, and that will change over time, right? Things will work, things will continue to add value, things will just need kind of reevaluating. But where are you adding value? You should be adding value at multiple points across the business, from the kind of from board level through to management level, through to the consultants, through to everything. That's marketing has those kind of touch points. The problem is, I think, is when it starts to go wrong and it starts to misalign, for the powers that be and for the kind of boards or the heads or the founders or whoever's kind of brought in that marketing team, what it starts to do, it starts to kind of erode the perception of marketing. And we have these conversations all the time. Oh, we had someone internally, or we worked with this company and it didn't work. And so you're already fighting an uphill battle almost, right? When you have those kind of conversations, because something hasn't worked in the past and it started to erode their perception of marketing. So it's being devalued somewhere within that business, simply because not necessarily hasn't been done right, but maybe it just hasn't been managed right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's again where this point of today comes from, around that kind of leadership thing, is right, because it's a lot of marketing leads should be managing upwards as managing downwards as well, right? So you're trying to kind of fight against this erosion of the perception of marketing, because everything that Chris has said and everything that Kat has said are always slightly kind of battling against us slightly. And it's not, oh, poor us, right, blah, blah, blah. But there is a kind of an internal battle sometimes that you're kind of having to make sure that the perception and the value of marketing is always being understood. And that's one of the kind of reasons of the marketing lead. But it can quite easily kind of get misaligned quite quickly. Again, on a day-to-day basis, we all know this. We do this on a day-to-day. You just kind of get snowed under with kind of, got to do this kind of quickly, got to do that.
The activity.
And suddenly the activity kind of starts to take over. And that's when you start to fight these battles around the kind of the misperception, miscommunication, and the perception of the marketing department. All this starts to slowly erode at what you're kind of trying to do and where it should be going. And that's when it becomes misaligned. And sometimes you can bring that back, sometimes you can't. And it's the same with people who are working within a full time within the business, as well as businesses that are outsourcing it. It can always kind of happen. But there should be, that's one of the reasons why someone who's strategically focused should be there to keep the direction, and be able to manage upwards and say, look, we're doing this because of this, and this, right? And we're doing this at the same time because we know this has come up, because there's always going to be some flexibility and all these kinds of things. But there's that kind of intermediary basically to manage upwards as well as manage kind of downwards to kind of fight this erosion.
Yeah.
Can I say a really quick point as well around? Sorry, I promise I'll keep it quick. Kind of measurement as well. I think and I'm sure you guys will see this as well. And it's any sales environment really. Like when you're measuring marketing, it's always going to be really different to how you measure sales. I think, sales is quite tangible. You can see how many people have picked up the phone. You can see how many people have been converted, things like that. With marketing, there's so much that happens within marketing activity that you can't measure and you can't see. And
there's so many touch points.
Yeah, and I think that maybe some people and strategy, it can go a bit wrong, especially kind of in recruitment, where they're judging people and measuring people the exact same way between sales and the consultants as they do with us in marketing and other marketers, right? And I think if you're looking for, a conversion the next day, for example, which a recruiter might be able to do, that's not going to happen with marketing. And I think that's maybe where the leadership and the whole strategy piece might get a little bit muddled up.
I don't think we should ever use that as an excuse. All right. I think people can kind of hang that over our heads a little bit sometimes. And I think that there is ways of measuring marketing. It is quite abstract at times as well. But I don't think this is not talking about us here. I know we're fairly hot on trying to kind of report back to our businesses and the people that we work with. But maybe the broader point here is understanding what to measure as well. Yeah. Right. Is sometimes it does need to align to what's going on in marketing. Sometimes it needs to be above what the marketing is going, because it's an MQL or something like that. Or sometimes it actually needs to be a bit below that, because it could be a sales deck or a piece of collateral that's kind of then been given to a consultant. So there's kind of there's all these kind of different points, so I think there's ways that we can measure it, but I don't think I agree that it can become quite abstract, especially when you're looking at what's going on online, right? Did someone see us over there, then get here, then get here, and get there? Notoriously difficult, right, to try and kind of measure. But I think there is stuff around, right? Okay, the consultant, they needed a sales deck, right? We got them a sales deck, and actually closures for those businesses have gone up by 10% or something. Right, and actually, that's just shifting the dial. Those kind of things, I think you can put down to something that the interaction between the sales department and the marketing department.
Yeah, I think also there can be a tendency to really look at how things are working and how things are performing in like little silos, rather than actually let's look at the wider piece. I think sometimes it can be quite quick to go, well, that's not working. This isn't working over here. This is giving us loads of vanity metrics. This is giving us loads of likes. So in theory, it looks like it's doing really well, but actually this might be doing a bit less in terms of the fizzy, sparkly stuff, but it might be delivering a bit more depth. So I think it's kind of at a strategic level, you're looking at it as a bit more bigger picture and all of those sort of like market signals and the analytics from that point of view, rather than just, well, this worked, this didn't work. It's kind of that broader picture, isn't it? Of, yeah, like you say, kind of this sales deck was produced to do this. This piece of marketing over here has been doing this, but that's, you know, that's how they're all working together. Indicate if you're going in the right direction, and yeah.
So that actually leads me on, because that's the second time that we've mentioned silos in this conversation. So to avoid that, what do you think a strategically led recruitment marketing function should look like in practice? So how do we break down those silos? How do we make sure that the senior leaders, like, or the C-suite level, are listening to what we're saying in marketing? So how do we, so what do you think our ideal strategic marketing function should look like in practice?
Do you want me to go? Kat, go on, Kat.
I think there's a couple of, from my perspective, there's a couple of points to this. If you're particularly if you're an in-house one, or even if you're an external one, a bit like us. But there's the direction side of things. So it's kind of, you know, having a good strategic marketing function is about having the plan, understanding the business objectives. That's the first point for me. Is you've got to, the leadership team have to communicate with marketing what the business is trying to achieve, because without that you can't deliver any effective marketing, really. Yeah. And then it's creating the plan, and it's all those things that you would normally look at as a marketer. So your positioning as a business, your messaging, all those sort of things, and then creating kind of, you know, your strategy, your plans, your campaigns to kind of help support that. I think kind of the other thing for me is we talking about silos. Marketing can't work in a silo. Marketing has to be visible. And my biggest piece of advice, if you're an in-house marketer, is be visible. And by that I mean go and sit with the recruiters, call them up. You know, don't just email people and sit behind, you know, an email screen, which is really easy for us all to do because everything's so digital these days. And, you know, it's very easy to just go, well, I emailed that person. Sometimes you've got to get old school and you've got to pick up the phone, or you've got to go and sit with people. If you're in an office with people, go and sit with them, walk over to the desk, have a conversation with them, because that's when you, as a marketer, that's when you become more visible, and people tend to respond better and get more involved if they see you and understand. You know, if you sit hot desking with a team for the day, you can talk to them about stuff you're working on, you're listening and hearing their phone calls, and then you can start understanding the challenges that they're having and, you know, the things they're coming up against, and perhaps suggest ideas. That to me is all part of that strategic marketing piece, because you are coming to them with ideas about how to solve their problems, rather than waiting for them to come and ask for stuff which may not be the right thing that they need, but because you don't really understand where it's coming from. So I think there's two bits: there's the strategy, the plan, the giving the direction from the strategic piece, and then not operating as a silo. Yeah, being embedded in the organization, working with the consultants and working with the leadership team as well, and giving communicating in a way that is not gobbledygook, that is clear and that talks to them in their language about what you're doing and why it's working. Yeah.
That communication piece is really, really important, right? So if you're going to kind of talk to the founders and the board, you need to talk their level. You need to talk about how C-suite speak, right? And you need to be aware of, you know, you have an idea of where the business is going. And when I've mentioned it a couple of times, like what's its 10-year, 5-year plan, and make the FD your best friend, right? Because that's the person who holds the purse strings, right? If you can prove to the FD that this is making money for the business, right, then you're onto a winner, right? So there's a certain amount of kind of being able to tactically put yourself in the position within the market as a marketeer within a business to make yourself invaluable. It's not just always around being a good marketeer, because there's lots of good marketeers. We're all good marketeers, right? But that doesn't always kind of mean that you kind of can do particularly well within that business. So I think to upsell, you know, you've got to be able to talk C-suite speak, and you've got to schmooze the FD, because that's the way to get money, basically, and prove and also prove back that there's money coming back in from return on investment.
Chris, we need to wrap up, but do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, as if you're a marketer working by yourself, like I'm just thinking outside the box. You know, there are communities out there. You're not the only one, right? Get on a WhatsApp group, get on your LinkedIn groups, go and network. There's other people there. You will find probably in your company that you're working with that other people like marketing as well. Find those marketing champions. If you want to bounce ideas off, I'm sure there's other people that want to bounce ideas off you as well. Or obviously, employ thinking circles.
Oh, that's a brilliant
You can
plug.
you can say that. I'm not sure I could hear it.
Yeah, that's a great plug. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. So hopefully this conversation has just helped clarify the difference between activity and strategy and what strategic leadership looks like within a recruitment business. Yeah, so if you're a founder feeling friction, or you feel like the business could be doing more, it's sometimes it's more about aligning better. And yeah, so yeah, as Chris beautifully said, please do reach out. We're on all of our socials. So yeah, this has been the Marketing Rules Live podcast, and thanks a million for joining us.
And we'll see you again next month.
Next
Similar
month.
time. A similar time.
Yeah.
When we decide it is. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.